It's been a while, had some various production hiccups to deal with and that sort of thing, but we're finally back to, well, the Nintendo Power Retrospectives. And yes, I'm behind, but from where my original goal of trying to get one of these per month, but we'll power through this. And as we are on issue 112 of September of 1998. This issue, F-Zero X is on the cover, but the competition from PlayStation is coming to pay a visit and get some mention as well. In the letters column, we have a question over whether the Game Boy camera can output to a real printer. In 1998, no. This issue, WWF Warzone enters the power charts. Or should I say, by God King, that's WWF Warzone's music! We have more coverage of F-Zero X, including profiles of all the drivers and their vehicles, plus tips on all the courses and advice on the X Cup. As I have already reviewed this, I'm moving on to the next game. We have Gex 64, the first of the ports from other consoles this issue. We have notes on the game structure, and tips for the various TV-themed levels. Gex 64 is definitely taking cues from Mario 64, in the sense that it gives you a structure with a series of worlds and various puzzles that you have to complete in order to advance in the game. And you accomplish these puzzles by exploring the environments, collecting items, observing enemies, that sort of thing. However, it's a game that's also trying way too hard to pair that structure with late 90s, early 2000s, honestly just late 90s humor, with various pop culture references being spouted in general banter from the title character, while going through the same general variety of levels inspired by another form of media, like what you'd get in, for example, the Tiny Toons games. In short, it's trying to be a slightly edgier, but not that much edgier, Animaniacs platformer. How much edgier? Well, they make repeated references to Cheech and Chong, but they don't make any references to, actual references to, weed. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work. Some of this is, well, it's a control problem, with issues around dealing with the camera while trying to navigate the level, something which, with how we handle dual sticks on modern controllers, honestly would fix fairly well. The other is a gameplay structure problem. The process of collecting the variety of items in sequence, which is one of the things you have to do for each level, isn't handled well, and while interchaining jokes around that process would make it more tolerable, the jokes aren't entertaining and get repetitive very fast. Like, I heard at least 5 to 6 times while recording the gameplay footage for this section, the same Cheech and Chong joke that I heard earlier. And it's just making a joke about Cheech and Chong and their names. Again, they're like, oh no, we have to be kind of E, maybe teen, so we can't acknowledge the existence of weed in the game. So, again, they're not willing to get edgy enough to fit with the concept, the core concept, which is Gex is basically, they don't say this outright, was effectively a stay-at-home stoner. And they can't play with that much. In classified information, which I probably should be pronouncing with a K, because we have a whole bunch of combat codes for Mortal Kombat 4. We have additional coverage of Bomberman Hero, covering some of the later areas of the game. Once again, I've covered this game, so let's move swiftly on. The guide for Mission Impossible continues with a guide for the game's hardest difficulty setting. Again, covered this. Continuing, I feel like we're in a slow period for the Nintendo 64, there's not a lot of good games to cover at this point in the N64's life, and so we're hedging our bets at this point. We have a continuation of the Ocarina of Time Preview coverage with some more tidbits of what you can find in Hyrule. Well, we've raced across the USA. Now it's time to race around the world, yeah, with Crusin World, and I wish to give my fondest apologies to Danny O'Dwyer for mangling his running joke from the Shift F1 podcast. We have maps of some of the tracks, which appear to be kind of circuits more than rally tracks, at least in some of the other gameplay modes. Crusin World is fine. It's a decent port of the arcade game, but it's an arcade port, and with it comes issues with rubber banding, which aren't helped by the fact that if you just tap oncoming traffic, or even cars you're trying to overtake just wrong, or you get tapped, by cars behind you just wrong, your race is effectively over with no way to quickly restart the race if you screw up your run, which is something that most racing games at this point have started doing. It's like, hey, you're playing single player, you blow it, go ahead and pause and restart. It's fine. You still got to do the race, so it's fine. Wipeout 64 is our second cross-platform title, and we get a preview of the game, which touts the success of past games on the PlayStation, which I'm impressed of them for saying that. Wipeout 64 is stupid hard, and I say that as someone who has played and enjoyed the later games in the series. I was never really able to beat a standard race, even when I ran nearly flawlessly. You start too far back in the pack and never quite take enough opponents out with your weapons to clear space to reach a podium. This is a real problem because, I'm going to be honest, Wipeout always exists in the shadow, or at least in dialogue with F-Zero. And when you're on the N64, that means you are directly up against whatever the most recent F-Zero title is. In this case, F-Zero X. So, if you're, in fact, which is your cover game. So when, you have to make that comparison, and F-Zero X holds up better. The art design and aesthetics to a degree for Wipeout I like more. The music I like both equally. I like the inclusion of weapons in Wipeout, but from a difficulty balancing standpoint, F-Zero X does it better. And that, I think, is the core fault with Wipeout 64, is on the PlayStation, it has a lot going for it in terms of being able to do CD quality audio, letting it work in with the EDM rave scene of the 90s, on top of having these visuals and the futuristic racing, and being kind of the only game in town, or the first major game in town. It does let you get away with certain things that, difficulty-wise, that you don't necessarily have with the with F-Zero X, or going up against F-Zero, because you're not on a platform with F-Zero. You're not on the platform with the game that defined this genre of futuristic racer in some respects. So, good showing, I guess. It'd be nice if we got a second Wipeout game on the N64, but that's not happening. Midway is doing the football with NFL Blitz what they did with basketball with NBA Jam. We have notes on existing plays and the fact that you can create your own, but this is more like a preview talking about the game in context of what's currently in arcades, so I'm going to save this for later. Camco is working on an on-rails shooter with Knife Edge, and we get notes on each of the game's levels. Knife Edge is, on the one hand, a basic on-rails shooter, which is a bit of a problem when you don't have control over your helicopter compared to something like Afterburner or Space Harrier or other similar games. It's also not helped by, yes, there are missiles, but it doesn't do lock-on the same way that, say, Afterburner does, where you can just paint the target, light them up, and then let the button go and the missiles go zipping out, or for that matter, Panzer Dragoon, since we're talking to reference a contemporary title. It makes for it being kind of a messy game, and I appreciate it, but it doesn't quite work. This also isn't helped by the fact that the game is strictly in first-person perspective, so theoretically, you can use the C buttons to evade incoming fire, but I don't know where the chopper is in comparison to the incoming fire, so I don't know how to better dodge. This also leads to problem number 3, which is, not to put too fine a point on it, first-person games of certain vintages make me motion sick. This is one of this game is in that vintage. And I suspect if I were to take the time to sit down and play the hell out of this and learn it and memorize the routes and that sort of thing, I would probably have sessions that'd be like about an hour and a half, and then I would need to stop and lie down because I'd get motion sick. That's a me thing. For some of you, this is probably fine. In Counselor's Corner, we have advice for Quest 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, along with how to see a preview of Banjo-Tooie. We have a preview for NASCAR 99 with some general notes on game features. We'll see if this comes back later and I'll revisit it then. Konami has a 3D fighter that also has a creative fighter mode with deadly arts. There's info on the game's roster, how the creative fighter system works, and on the stages. When it comes to Japanese game developers and the genres they are known for, Konami doesn't get associated with fighting games very much. They've done some in the past, but it's not something that's up there on their radar. This is rather unfortunate because while Deadly Arts is a flawed fighting game, it's one with a lot of promise. Controls need to be polished as they rely very heavily on the A and B buttons for a lot of the heavy lifting for the attacks, and it's not entirely clear in the game how movement in the game's levels environments works. Additionally, by limiting the number of attacks, the move list is somewhat restrained compared to, for example, Virtua Fighter and Tekken. However, the character designs have a lot of flair to them. They're vibrant and expressive, an anime style that pops, but with each character having an archetype to them that is recognizable and sets a certain kind of grounded tone. Unfortunately, and this is where the game feels like it really needs a sequel, there isn't much here to develop the characters. There's no pre-fight or post-fight banter like in Street Fighter. There's no taunts and combat like in Street King of Fighters. It's just dry. That said, I like the idea of a fighting game with creative fighter, and what we have here is a good start. It's just that this is a concept that needed iteration, and I don't think it ever got it. Koei has invented the cover-based shooter for the N64 with WinBack. We have profiles of a bunch of the game's characters and a bunch of game mechanics, but the game itself is a ways off, so I'll be covering it later. No also ran this issue and now playing, and at Pak Watch, Pokemon is coming out in September, and there's a multi-state promotional tour that is being done to, well, promote the game, including new Volkswagen Beetles painted like Pikachu. And finally, wrapping things up for Pak Watch, Buck Bumble and its earworm of a title theme is on its way to the N64. We also have a publisher profile of Acclaim along with several of their studios. My pick for the issue is Deadly Arts. While the game had some flaws, there's the seed of a really good fighting game franchise here. One we didn't really get. I went and looked up and we don't really have any sequels for this. There are other fighting games that were done by Konami. We got Kensei Sacred Fist, which was on the PlayStation, but honestly, I wish we'd gotten more of this, got a chance to develop this game franchise, because I like the concept of this. I like the idea of being able to create your own fighters, and I would have loved to have had the chance for one more title or a couple more titles to develop this concept further. But again, this game got panned spectacularly. EGM didn't like it. Famitsu didn't like it. IGN didn't like it. GameSpot didn't like it. And I think this is a case where, again, Deadly Arts 2 would have developed on this a lot and made for a much more interesting game. Or picked up the interesting pieces that this laid down and go somewhere even more interesting with it. I would, in fact, recommend any aspiring game developers who are planning to work in the fighting game space to take a look at Deadly Arts and see what it's trying to do, and maybe take some lessons from that for their own titles. Next issue, Turok is back. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. And also consider backing my Patreon. Patreon backers get episodes up to 1 week early of this show and any future Let's Plays. Also, please consider backing my Ko-fi. Toss me a few bucks also helps support the show, and it's not a monthly obligation or anything like that.